Good morning again. This reading is entitled, Does Satan Exist? It's from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The Bible tells us in chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, Then, after baptism, was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. To most modern minds, this passage seems quaintly obsolete. Psychologists would say, have said, in fact, that the temptation of Jesus, if it occurred at all, was purely psychological. They call it a projection of desires lurking in his own subconscious mind. The subconscious plays a strong part, certainly, even if not a unique one, in any testing the spiritual seeker must undergo. The Bhagavad Gita, in dealing with this undeniable reality, quotes Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, and then Sri Krishna's reply. Yet, tell me, teacher, said Arjuna, by what force doth man go to his ill, unwilling, as if one pushed him in that path? Krishna replied, Desire it is, passion it is, born of the darknesses, which pusheth him. Mighty of appetite, sinful and strong is this, man's enemy. Yet even Krishna describes passion as born of the darknesses. The fact is, as Paramhansa Yogananda wrote in Autobiography of a Yogi, all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. Thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created, but only perceived. Psychology, yes, but psychology attuned to currents of consciousness that pervade the entire universe, attracted by each of us according to our own personal inclinations. Yogananda, quoted in the New Path, said, I used to think Satan was only a human invention, but now I know and add my testimony to that of others who lived before me, that Satan is a reality. He is a universal, conscious force whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion. We should take pains, then, to attract uplifting currents of universal consciousness, and to avoid attracting the negative, which, disease that it is, and to avoid attracting the negative, which, disease that it is, can infect our thoughts, even while it leads us to believe that our thoughts are purely our own. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. Here's also a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is entitled Prayers on the Beads of Love. Master writes, I tell my prayers on the beads of love, strung with my devotion. I direct them beyond all names, God, Spirit, Brahma, Christ, Shankara, Krishna, Buddha, Mohammed, for all names are thine. And I shun no name, for I know that thou dwellest in all forms. In thy cosmic dramas on the stage of life, and in thy myriad acting roles, thou hast assumed innumerable names. Behind them all, too, I know thy one, changeless name, eternal, conscious, self-existent bliss. Many times have I played with thee, many songs of thine have I sung. On the ocean bosom of thy eternal life, I've been nurtured by thee as a tiny drop of life. I remember thy warm touch through the centuries whenever, feeling the chill of separation, I turned homeward toward thee. Again in this daylight of remembrance, let me play with thee, let me sing thy songs. This is such a important topic and question, does Satan exist? And there are many different approaches to it, and different ways we could build up a case for it, and then give some exhibit A and exhibit B and exhibit C. But let's just pretend that's already all been done. And let's leap to Master's statement that I used to think Satan didn't exist and was just a mental concept, but now I add my testimony to those who have come before that he is an existing conscious reality. There is a statement there's a saying in English that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was to convince the world that he didn't exist. You see, because then he can cause all kinds of mischief and never get caught, never get blamed, never be suspected. Swamiji makes a similar statement, even more powerfully, that we can be attracted to negativity. We can have it passing through our minds, influencing us, all the while thinking our thoughts are purely our own. You see, no, these are my thoughts only. All the time being influenced. And so it's quite powerful a force, and quite something to be, as Swamiji writes elsewhere, we should fear it, not in the sense of cowering before it, but in the sense of being aware of our potential to be influenced. I had the first part correct, but then I started having to paraphrase because I couldn't remember exactly the second part. But we have to watch for it. We have to be suspicious. Swamiji, someone was asking Swamiji once about intuition. How do you know when you have a thought, if it's an intuition or if it's not an intuition, if it's an imagination or something? And Swamiji said, I would be particularly suspicious if, when asking a question and asking for an answer, your intuition goes right in line with your desires. In other words, you want the answer to be this, and your intuition said it was that. How wonderful. Be careful. It doesn't mean you're wrong, but be careful, especially if someone says, no, I think it's the opposite. No, it's this. As soon as we're like this, then we have a problem, because we are attached. What is attachment? This. When you find yourself doing this, it's automatically attached. You're automatically realize, we self-diagnose. I am attached. Look in the mirror. Okay, problem. Because if it's true, why be upset about it? Truth is not afraid of questions. And truth does not require us to be emotional in its defense. If it's true, it's true. If someone comes along and says it just rained, if you come along and say, oh, it just rained, someone said, no, it didn't just rain. You say, no, look outside. No, that's not water. That's just the shade of the sun, the shadows of the sun. It didn't rain. You say, look, were you asleep all these past hours? Didn't you hear the rain? No, there was no rain. But you won't likely get too mad because you know it rained. In fact, we're all very happy that it rained. And so you just say, well, I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not going to get drawn into this. But it's not something we get too upset about because it's undeniably true. And we know it to be true. This is easy to do with something objective and something that isn't too personal. It's harder to do when we come under personal attack. Someone says, you're a fool for believing the way you do. You're not right. It's not right for you to practice what you practice. You're not a good person. All these things. Somehow your philosophy is wrong. Somehow your actions are wrong. All these things can be tricky to deal with because especially for a devotee, we want to be honest. We want to be truthful. We don't want to claim, no, there's nothing wrong with me. If there's nothing wrong with you, then you must be in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And if we are not in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, then we still have some work to do. And we should rejoice in that fact because it's only through doing that work that we will enter Samadhi, that we will get free. And it isn't just that you have to finally get, 98% pure, 99% pure, 100% pure. Now finally something good can happen. No. Each step along the way brings more and more joy. If I'm correct, I believe that Master, when asked what is evil, said evil is the absence of true joy. Maybe someone else said it. Maybe the quote is a little different. I don't have it exact in my mind, but I know that's the statement. Evil is the absence of true joy. You see that? Because it's not evil is the absence of good. Yes. That's sort of how we always think of it. What's good? Well, that's the good thing. Whatever. What's evil? It's not good. And so it's the absence of true joy. So first of all, there should be joy. If there isn't joy, there is a problem. But then you could say, well, but what about people who do wrong and feel really good about it? What about me? Suppose someone gets someone irritates us and we go, ah! And then they run away and we go, ah, I feel joy. Doesn't it seem at first to feel good? I feel relief of that tension that was building up in me, and now it has been released and now I feel much better. But that is not true joy. How do we know? Just because we're told it's not true? No, because afterwards you kind of go, maybe I shouldn't have. But it was ridiculous what they did. And anyone would have done worse than I did. It was not bad. We justify. And then what happens when we see the person? Hard to look them in the eye because we know, I have wronged you. And so, again, it can't be true joy then if we have a guilty conscience. It's just our own internal truth meter tells us something's not right. It's hard to sleep peacefully after that. Better to go to the person, just apologize. Say, I'm very sorry, even though you totally deserved it. No, sure. Apologize for your side. Let them apologize for their side or not. The fact is, we are responsible for our actions. And so we should clean up after ourselves. They are responsible for their actions. And so let it be with them and on them. Let us not worry about it. Someone said to me once, the sins of the father are visited upon the son. And I said, the sins of the father are visited upon the father. You see, it really is that way. To some extent it's true, there is family karma, and to a certain extent, yes, you can have a little bit of the karma of your family or of your clan. There's national karma, so it is true in a certain sense that we are influenced beyond that. But in this case, I was not willing to tolerate it. So, we can think whatever we want about whether Satan exists, but denying that Satan exists is like saying it didn't just rain, because it did, and he does. Master said that he, for example, there was a disciple who was, Master was with a group of disciples, and there was one disciple sitting in the back, and Master had a piece of paper, and he was just fiddling with the paper, and then he rolled the paper into a cone shape. Like an ice cream cone, but the other way. And he said he saw this disciple in the back of the room, and he motioned to her, and he said, come here. And she said, no. Now, what's going on here? In the olden days, in America, and possibly in India, I don't know, there was this cone-shaped hat called a dunce cap. And so if you did something wrong in school, or if someone said, what is 1 + 1, and you said green, then they said, Munariva. And they made you sit in the corner in front of everybody and put the dunce cap on your head, and you had to sit there, and everyone laughed. You can see why the practice was abandoned when someone finally grew a heart and realized how ridiculous this is. It doesn't take into account a lot of things. But still, we have our own versions of dunce caps even now, because the ego is always eager to try to put itself above other people. As Sri Yukteswarji said, some people try to become tall by cutting off the heads of others. Say, I'm taller than you now that you're about a foot shorter and also dead. So we criticize people. Oh, see, yes, it's true he was better than me than that, but gosh, I wouldn't want to be him. Do you know? Just again, trying to undercut somebody, just so we can feel better. And so, Master said to this disciple, come here, when he was holding this cone that looked just like the dunce cap. And she said, no. And then Master said, come here. And she said, no. And then Master said to all the other disciples, you all leave. And then he told her one more time, come here. And so she came forward and she knelt at his feet and she burst into tears. And he patted her on the head. He didn't put the thing on her head at all. He just patted her on the head. And I think part of it may have been that she herself said that she wasn't very strong as a student in school. Maybe she had to wear that dunce cap, and so this was bringing up a painful past. So, how sweet. But there's more to the story. Master said to her, either then or later, if you had resisted me one more time, you would have left the spiritual path. He said, I saw Satan on one side of you and Divine Mother on the other. Probably Divine Mother's on the right side, Satan on the left side. Equally pulling. He said, but then when I saw you come here, then you moved towards Divine Mother and Satan vanished. For that moment anyway. Now, that's a big test. Over something that seems so trivial in a way. You know? I mean, even Sri Yukteswar called to Master, Mukunda! And he wasn't going to come because he was sitting in his room. Still, he did come on the third call. But, he even showed us how that we get rebellious. We resist. No, Guruji, I won't do it. And so on. But still he came finally, and still she came finally. What bothered me about that story, and bothers me still, though I think I understand it a little better, is that if you resisted me one more time, you would have left the spiritual path? Just sitting in the living room saying, come here near the dunce cap? I mean, that's a big penalty. That's a big punishment for not just crossing a room. Couldn't he have warned her? Come here. No. Come here. You know, telling her there's a lot more at stake here. If you don't come here, you may leave the spiritual path. Why didn't he just tell her? Gosh, if I heard that, I'd run. Grab onto his feet. No, I don't want to go back to the storms of delusion. No, I don't want to go back to my miserable life. And so let me be with you. Couldn't he have hinted? This is a big question. And why didn't he? Because then it wouldn't be a test. You see? He would just be deferring the test. And this was her scheduled exam time. She had to push through this herself. She had to choose, in this moment, which way do I go? This was the way often Master would test people, and Swamiji ended, we saw it, well, let me put it differently. Swamiji spoke of this, that Master would bring people to their breaking point, and then see if they broke in favor, if they broke open, or if they broke down. If they broke towards the positive. In this case, she just surrendered to the Guru, in this other story I'm telling you. Or if they broke away and just said, no, this I will not stand for. Swamiji talks about this when Master he and Norman, after they had all these mounds of sand all over Master's compound, because they were digging a hole for a swimming pool, and they were just about to have lunch. It was extremely hot. Right when they were about to quit, Master came out and said, here, take one of these boards and push it back and forth between you, trying to level this mound of sand, because these mounds don't look very attractive. And so, as Swamiji said, they pushed it back and forth. It was very difficult to do. I mean, imagine putting it on sand. These are high mounds, mind you, and pushing it, trying to level it out. And so when they got one done, the Master said, oh good, I thought that would work. Let's try it on another one. And as Swamiji writes in the New Path, readjusting our expectations accordingly, we went to the next one, and then they did that. And Master said, oh, okay, good, just one more. And so then they went to just one more, and they were really exhausted at this point. And then he said, just one more. And just one more. Swamiji said, I don't know how many mounds we leveled that day, but Norman, strong as he was beginning to moan softly under his breath because of just the agony of doing this. And then they finished one more, and they were sitting down, and Master said, just one more. And Swamiji stood up, and he laughed, because he finally got the joke. And Master said, I was playing with you, now have your lunch. But he said he was intentionally bringing them to their breaking point to see which way they would break, for two reasons at least. One is, as a test, you could say, I mean, Master knew everything anyway, but still, as a test to see, under pressure, which way will you go? And he said, Swamiji said, if Master saw somebody break towards the positive, then he knew it would build his faith in the person. Again, I just say that in a human way. Master, of course, could read everything, but let's just leave that aside, because this is a lesson we can learn. When we see somebody tested and brought to their breaking point, and they break towards the positive, then we learn something about them. We can trust them more. We can, in fact, there's especially in Master's case, he could have given them more responsibility. But he said, Swamiji said, if he saw them break towards the negative, then Master would see that they weren't yet ready. They weren't yet wanting to grow in this direction. That's really all that it comes down to. It's not a question of not being good enough or smart enough. It's just, what are you interested in? What do you want? What are you here for? Are you here to grow? Or are you here to stay small? And this is not something that we make one decision about. It's a decision we're faced with constantly. And in some cases it's easier for us to say, fine, no problem, let me learn. And in other cases we get defensive and say, no, no, no. Why is that? I think sometimes it's because when it's easy for us, suppose you make coffee and you make it wrong, and someone says, no, you're not supposed to heat the coffee decoction up also. If it gets hot, it releases some poisons. I don't know if any of this is true. People tell me. So far I'm alive, but if not tomorrow, you can say, see? But something you don't have any ego or pride in. Excuse me. I did heat the decoction today. I'm kidding. If we don't have any ego in this particular thing and someone says you did it wrong, we say, oh really, fine, I'm learning. It's easy to make an adjustment. It's easy to say, yeah, I was wrong, sure. No problem. We don't have anything invested in it. But if someone pokes at us right where we have been poked 100 times before, somebody saying, you're not very smart, and suppose we grew up having an older sibling or a parent say all the time, you're not very smart. Someone comes along and says, you're not very smart. They poke us just as hard as they did about the coffee decoction, but this part is sore, very sore. And one touch, as Sri Yukteswarji said, diseased parts recoil under even the mildest touch. That's how we know we have a sensitivity, a wound there. And on the one hand, we have to heal it, and on the other hand, we have to be square about it. Master said, sensitivities like that are of the devil, basically. He was very strong about it. When you're too emotionally sensitive in that way, it means too reactive, too defensive, too protective, then we have to accept this is wrong. It doesn't mean we're wrong, because criticizing yourself, oh, I'm wrong, oh, I'm terrible, is just as wrong also. So you see, you have to find the middle path, which is, let me not even think about myself too much. Let me try to help someone. And if something comes up that hurts, let me just say, Divine Mother, this hurts. There's that very charming story of Ramakrishna, who, I don't remember how he hurt himself, but he didn't burn his hand. Maybe he burned it, or maybe he cut it. I forget how. But he had this cut, and he was saying, ow, 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 ow. And he was suddenly acting like a child, like a young child. And right then, one of the wealthy supporters of the temple, not Rani Rasmani, not the true benefactor, but someone else came to the temple, and the disciples were worried because they didn't want him to see the master just acting just like a baby. But they were saying, he's here, but maybe he shouldn't come. And he said, no, let him come, let him come. And so with great fear, they brought this big man in. And Ramakrishna showed him, and he said, oh, it hurts. He held it up to him, and he said, it hurts. And the man was so charmed that he had a very happy reaction to this. He tried to comfort Ramakrishna. You see, it melted the man's heart, if it needed melting. But in any case, he was open to it. And on the other hand, Ramakrishna was dancing around in ecstasy, and one of the coals fell out of the brazier where they were having the fire ceremony or whatever, and the disciples started smelling, what is this? And it was burning flesh, and they saw that this was burning a hole into his back, and they said, Guruji, there's this coal. He said, oh, just take it out. You see, it didn't bother him at all. So it isn't that Ramakrishna was afraid of being burned. But you see, the masters, we don't always know what play they're having. And sometimes what they say doesn't even make any sense to us, but later it does, especially if we can figure out that what they predicted was true. So, in this way, we have to see when we are at our breaking point, let's try to break towards the positive. First simple thing, surrender. Okay, Master, you got me. I'm lost. I lose. Please help me. Let's play again, and this time you guide me. If we, there's that nice statement, learn to laugh at yourself and you will find endless amusement. It's good to laugh at ourselves. It's good to take ourselves lightly. I was taught this lesson by Swamiji in a satsang, when he had written in a book that how can motion, for example, the motion of Maya, which is movement, create the physical world around us? How can something moving, we think of something moving as sort of it's neither here nor there, at any moment, how can it create something solid to the touch? And so Swamiji said in the book, he wrote, look at the rotating blades of a fan. If they rotate fast enough, they look like a solid disc. And he said, it's such a wonderful example. And I thought, it is a good example. I wonder how it could be improved upon. I was new. And so I thought, all right, well, if you throw a rock at the spinning fan, it'll bounce off as if it's solid. Pretty good, huh? In fact, it won't bounce off exactly as it would if it were a solid stationary thing, but it will bounce off. So, armed with this insight, I went to a satsang, and waiting for an opportunity, you can already see all the hints of my downfall being given. All the little indications are there to everyone except me. And so then, to my great joy, Swamiji brought up this example. In fact, the rotating blades of a fan, they appear solid. He said, when you come up with a really wonderfully clear illustration, it's just great. He said, I love it. And I said, the nice thing about that, Swamiji, is that if you throw a rock at the fan, then it will bounce off. And he said, yes, it gives that impression of solidity. He said, if you were to sit on it, I think it would give another impression. Everybody laughed. All the people in the room laughed except one. And I just wanted to disappear into my shirt. I turned bright red. As Master said, it's scarcely possible for an Indian to blush, so I guess I half blushed. But I didn't understand. Well, why did he have to... Then in another satsang, I was more innocent in this one, Swamiji, we all got together, a small group of us in a satsang, and Swamiji said, do you have any questions? And nobody said anything right away, and he said, well, we could just meditate, and I thought, here we are, just like 6 of us or 8 of us with Swamiji, and we're just going to meditate? In retrospect, I think it might have been the wiser choice. But at the time, it was like, we have a chance. He's there. We're here. We can ask him something. And so I said, Swamiji, I have a question. And he said, how could we expect anything else? And again, everybody laughed. But I did ask my question. And but then later I thought, now why would he tease me? And then I realized, I'm sure there are many reasons, and the first one that I realized was that I was taking myself too seriously. I didn't mind laughing at myself, ha ha ha, behind closed doors, out of earshot from anyone else. But for everyone else to laugh, oh my gosh, that was way too much. Because I said something, it was intelligent and well thought out. Who cares? Be like a child with the Guru. It was very sweet to me when I saw Swamiji greet someone who had come from Delhi, and he said, "Tum kaise ho?" Because I was learning Hindi, and I learned "Aap kaise hain?" Aap. Everyone is Aap, and he said "Tum." Very sweet. And so, and the person smiled and said whatever they said. But we want to just be children. We want to be open with the Guru. We want to be this way. it's always beautiful to see how Master was so strong, but he was like a child with Sri Yukteswar. After visiting Sri Yukteswar, having built this tremendous work in America, and then saying in 1935 to Sri Yukteswar, having conquered, continents, saying, Master, your rug is torn, let me buy you a new one. And Sri Yukteswar said, do so if it pleases you. Behold, my mat is nice and clean. Beyond it is the outside world, interested only in externals. And Master said, suddenly I was back in the hermitage and, being chastised and corrected openly for, something like this. It was just so sweet. Not only that Sri Yukteswar was happy to just do this, but how Master just took it so sweetly. Instead of saying, listen, I'm a grown-up now. I'm a guru too now. No, nothing like that. The greatest mark of the guru is that he is always a disciple of his guru. Master writes of Sri M in the same way, Master Mahashaya, not Lahiri Mahashaya, Master Mahashaya. And he said whatever statement he would make, he would always end it by saying, so my Guru Deva often said. He would always refer the credit back to Ramakrishna. So, we have to be aware of the influence of negativity. We don't have to fear it, but we have to always be aware of it, and we have to choose which people we're going to mix with, negative people or positive people. We're going to have to think of, even when we're alone, which thoughts to indulge, the negative thoughts or the positive thoughts. Remember when Lahiri Mahashaya was criticizing someone silently at the Kumbh Mela, and then he saw Babaji washing the feet of one of these basically people who Lahiri Mahashaya thought was kind of a fake sadhu. And Babaji was washing his feet. And then he said, Guruji, how are you here and what are you doing? And then he said, first of all, well, I don't have the order right, but he said, I am washing this ascetic's feet, and then I will clean his utensils. In this way I am learning the virtue most pleasing to God above all others, humility. And so whenever we feel a little bit like, just think of Babaji washing. Babaji, Mahavatar. Avatar is way beyond Mahavatar. That is like PG, And so that is it's beyond. And so he is washing this man's feet and learning humility. He was, of course, really teaching humility. But that's for us to remember. That's the competition. Who can be the humblest? Swamiji would joke sometimes, I'm the humblest man in Los Angeles and I want everyone to know it. It was, of course, a joke. But still, that desire to be more is one of wanting to expand, to feel more. It comes from inside ourselves. And we do that by the ego becoming less. The less the ego becomes, the greater the soul becomes. And some people never understand this, even their whole lives, even on the path. And so, again, how do we know if we're understanding, or how do we understand it more? Try to feel more joy. And if what you're doing isn't bringing you joy, stop. Try something else. Try meditating. Try chanting. Try, I am awake and ready, trying to, I guess that's not this one, but be glad my brain be wise and strong, please. Do something to snap out of it. Remember, the darkness, the negativity, always want to engage us in a debate. As long as you are in discussion with that darkness, it is winning. You don't beat it by beating at it with a stick or beating it logically. Its whole goal is to engage. There is a story, folk tale in America of a tar baby that was basically a little Morty made out of tar, and it trapped one of the clever animals because it touched the tar and it couldn't let go. It was a sticky thing, and no matter what it did, it couldn't let go. And so I think the story has a happy ending, probably. But in any case, the tar baby is something we think of a lot. That as long as you're touching it, you're stuck to it. it's better to back away. Some people are like that when they argue with you. They just want to argue. They don't want to convince you. That's what's so frustrating, is because you answer every point and they just continue to argue. Or in the end they just say, well, I'm right anyway. Which is, even though each point I have answered you calmly and fairly, but no, I'm still right. Because it's not a desire to discuss and to learn, it's just a desire to engage and to argue. And so, this, Swamiji said he even saw among some of his fellow disciples. They would come up to him and they would say, so, Master's wonderful. And he would say, yes, so Master's wonderful. It's so nice. Oh, here's someone who wants to talk about Master. They say, but why does he do that kind of thing? And Swamiji said, he just answered them, well, he probably does that because of this reason. Oh, well, and why is he like this? And so he would answer them. Well, he's probably like this because of this. And then they didn't like any of that, and they left him alone from then on. Because they didn't want that. They wanted him to say, yeah, I don't know why he's like that. And to get all worked up over it. And he said, to the point where some of them were saying, we've got to save the organization from its founder. Because of that, and you can say, no, couldn't be, but it comes in everywhere. Master said, if there are two negative people in a room, they will find a way to smell each other out. But the question is, what are you doing? Where are you going? Where are you choosing? Let other people do whatever they want to do. Don't worry about it. But what are the choices that you have? Again, another thing that, and I said, if you have negative thoughts, which thoughts are you choosing to give energy to? The negative thoughts will be there. That's okay, but don't give them any attention. Put energy in the positive direction. When Babaji met Lahiri Mahashaya, he also said, or was it to Sri Yukteswar, this whole world is a mixture of sugar and sand. Be like the wise ant who seizes the sugar and leaves the sand untouched. So when you see, look at that, I just don't see why. Can you believe that? Just say to yourself, sugar and sand. Am I the wise ant or am I the dumb ant? It's bad enough being an ant. You don't want to be a dumb ant. Be the wise ant. Take the sugar, leave the sand untouched. It will be there. Let some other ants, hey, go get that sand, and then there's more sugar for you. You see? I mean, if Babaji is telling people this more than 100 years ago, it's been a problem for some time. It's an eternal struggle. So just skip to the punchline. Sugar and sand. There's a beautiful phrase that comes from Christianity that a friend of mine said her mother would always say when someone would come to the house and they would be criticizing one of the uncles, and can you believe, and I heard that he did this, it's just so terrible. And the mother would say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Meaning, if it weren't for God's grace, God's protection, I could make the same exact mistake. And she said, the daughter, a friend of mine, she said that always inspired her, how her mother just wouldn't get into that. And it inspired the daughter too, to go in that direction, to be positive, don't be unkind. And Swamiji said too, Master would love people who had all kinds of horrible flaws. Swamiji said you would even wonder, what does he see in that person? Why is he giving that person so much energy when they have all these troubles? And Master would say, they would even ask him about it, and Master would say, oh, he's a very good father to his children. Or something. He would find some quality, good quality that the person had, and emphasize that. And I was very charmed when I heard that Swamiji said that about Master, because that's how we felt about Swamiji. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it's perfectly true that I would see somebody and just go, gosh, why is Swamiji giving that person so much energy when they have all these problems and they're always... And what Swamiji would be, he would be so kind, and he would emphasize that. He would see the good potential in somebody, and he would give energy to that, especially if they wanted it, especially if they were open to it. If after a time they weren't, and they didn't open, then Swamiji would respect their wish, their right to remain closed. And he perhaps might give energy elsewhere. But Swamiji also talked about a situation when there was a man who told people, he was a part of Ananda or visited Ananda, but then he left, but he lived nearby. And he was saying, one of these days I'm going to go up there and I'm going to give that Kriyananda a piece of my mind. And so he would tell this to different members of Ananda, and then when they would come up, they would see Swamiji, and they say, yeah, we saw so-and-so, and this is what he said. And so this happened for some, I don't know, weeks or months. And finally, Swamiji came into a Sunday satsang, and he saw the man sitting there. I guess perhaps Swamiji was entering from the back of the room, or he saw the man. Anyway, he went right up to the man. You know, he didn't kind of go, oh, there's the... All right, you know. He wasn't cruising for a battle. And he wasn't afraid. Actually, let's just have someone chant. He wasn't afraid. He went right up to the man and he greeted him. And he said, hello, Bob, or whatever the man's name was. He said, and then I waited. Ready for him to just vent his spleen, just to spew his poison, or just, he said, get it off his chest. Even in that, Swamiji was just trying to help him. Just let him say it. He'll probably feel better afterwards. And the man looked at him and just smiled and hugged him. He hugged Swamiji. He couldn't in the face of that, because Swamiji wasn't defensive. Swamiji wasn't aggressive. He was saying, listen, go ahead, say it. He didn't say that, but he waited. He didn't go, hello, Bob, and run away before, there's a bunch of people here. What witnesses? No, he wasn't afraid. Don't be afraid. In another situation, there was a man who argued with Swamiji constantly. He left Ananda. He even ended up attacking Ananda in different ways. And at one time that they met, one of the times that they met, there was some big function, and people from Ananda came, and people from somewhere else came, and then Swamiji, they happened to exit the building, and he met this man, and he said, Jim, why don't you come up to Ananda village sometime, and we can have tea. This was someone who basically had styled himself as one of Swamiji's enemies, not just a negative person. And in certain ways, he acted very much like an enemy outwardly. And in details I don't want to go into. But I'm happy to go into afterwards if you're curious. But the man, when Swamiji invited him to tea, the man said, and what will we talk about? Loyalty to the Guru? And Swamiji said, Jim, I could be the devil himself, and it wouldn't be your problem. And the man said, Jim said, I know. Just for that one moment, he was open. He was consumed with his own anger at Swamiji. But Swamiji is saying, look, even if you're completely right, still it's not your problem to worry about, to get so worked up about. Unfortunately, it didn't work in the end, at least as far as we know. But that was Swamiji's response. That's what I'm guiding you towards. How you can stand in the face even of such negativity and let it not be your problem. Another solution is to give. When you're afraid of what's coming at you, instead give. And I don't mean give. I mean, give kindness. Give coffee. I sometimes have joked, if you have a relative who's always criticizing, give them some coffee. Because at least while they're drinking, they won't be able to say anything. And so feed them too, something sticky perhaps that takes a long time to chew. In order, I found a solution. Do we have a cork somewhere? And so, again, this kind of a thing. Don't be afraid of it. It's just the sand trying to overwhelm the sugar. You find whatever sugar you can in this situation. And again, just be in God's joy. Even if it's everyone else is upset, you can just say, well, Divine Mother, it's a beautiful show, and I want to be watching your show. God bless you.